Okay, guys, it's 8 o'clock, and we're gonna get going. So tonight, I'm gonna give you a short, hopefully half an hour to 40 minutes on stress, understanding stress, and why I think stress is actually the new smoking. I think it costs more money for the NHS every year than smoking does. It causes more. 7 of the top 10 most expensive illnesses that are treated in the UK today are related to lifestyle, and stress is very heavily involved in all of that. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is to understand and ask ourselves simply, what is stress? What is stress? And the honest answer is that stress is anything that requires us to adapt. So think, financial pressure that requires us to physiologically adapt. Emotional pressure of marriage breakdown that requires us to adapt. Alcohol that requires us to adapt. So stress is anything that requires our body to have to adapt. Okay. And secondly, it's very important that we say stress is not a feeling. My son, my 15-year-old, is very prone to say, I'm so stressed. He's got exams at the moment online. I'm so stressed. Yes, that's a feeling of anxiety based on a stimulus. But stress is actually a physiological response. It's a change within your body. It's not just a feeling. And it's very, very important to understand. So I'm going to repeat that. Stress is a physiological change in your body. It is not just a feeling. Okay. So I'm going to use this picture. And if any of you have been into a chiropractic office, indeed, if you've been into ours, you'll see a picture like this. And it's a picture of the nervous system, in fact, the autonomic nervous system. And we're just going to have a very quick dodder around this. So please bear with me. Okay. This is about the best view of it. So what we have here at the top is our brain. And this is our massive computer that basically governs every single thing in our body. And it does through the nervous system down through the spinal cord. And we have 33 pairs of spinal cords, 33 pairs of nerves that come off there, and 12 cranial nerves. And it receives information from the body using the sensory input. So nerve information goes up. Right now, all of you just have a feel of the inside of your shoes, and you'll feel something. Wiggle your toes, and what's happening is you're sending a motor signal all the way down. And that's the bit you can feel, and that's the bit you can control. But what I want you all to do now is to move your lunch, which will guarantee will still be inside you, 6 inches along your digestive system. And the honest answer is you can't. And that's because it's done by this thing, the autonomic nervous system. So that actually says that here, the autonomic nervous system. And we could call that actually the automatic nervous system. That could be another word for it. So that's the part of our nervous system that innately controls all of our function that we don't have direct control over. So how fast our heart beats, the dilation of our arteries, the digestion of our food, our breathing, our hormone changes within our reproductive system, and so on and so forth. All of that, sweating, all of that is controlled automatically. You can't, if I said to you sweat now, you couldn't. You'd have to think about something really emotional to make that happen. Maybe some actors can do that. They can cry and things. Okay, so that's all controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And it's split down into 2 halves. Put colloquially, we've got the fight or flight nervous system. That's the sympathetic. And we call that the sympathetic. And then we've got the rest and repair. And we call that the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic. So the fight or flight is predominantly uses a hormone we call adrenaline, or if you're a doctor, you might call it epinephrine. And the rest and repair uses a hormone called acetylcholine, but you don't need to remember that really. The point is adrenaline is the one. So we've got fight or flight and rest and repair. Fight or flight, sympathetic. Rest and repair is parasympathetic. Okay, so how does this work? Well, The sympathetic on this chart are all these yellow nerves. Now, I hope you can see they're yellow, and they have a little nerve that goes from the spine out to every single one of our organs. So here's one that goes to our parotid gland, the mucous membrane of our mouth, the glands underneath our tongue, the glands in our jaw, our eyes, our heart, lungs, stomach, small intestine, our liver, pancreas, large intestine, the adrenal glands, which actually sit on top of the kidneys, the large intestine, the bladder, the kidneys, and the sexual organs. So a yellow nerve goes to all of those things. Also, a green nerve, these are parasympathetic, goes to all of those things as well. One provides adrenaline, and the other one provides acetylcholine. So what you can actually see is that all of the organs down here have a green nerve which comes from within our pelvis, and these are called the parasympathetic nerves that may basically go to all of our reproductive organs, our bladder, our kidney, and our large intestine, right down at the bottom, round about our bottom. But all of the other parasympathetic nerves come from our head. And the very long nerve called the vagus nerve, which vagus means wanderer, it's a very long nerve, and it comes out of the side of your head, just behind your ear here. And it goes down your neck, and it literally goes, and it stops off at your heart, your lungs, and every other organ in your body, down to just below your belly button. And then the parasympathetic but just below your belly button comes from your pelvis. Okay, so it's very important that we understand these two nervous systems, and they should always be in balance. Now, right now, we have your brain is taking sensory information from your heart. And actually, that sensory information travels along in the same trench as the sympathetic. It travels along the yellow one. And depending on your state of arousal or rest, it will either send, if it wants you to be more aroused, it'll send an adrenal message down your sympathetic, or if it wants you to be more at rest, it'll send a quieten down message down your parasympathetic. So basically, we have this constant balancing act between our body. Now, I want to just talk about a simple fight or flight response. And we have a fight or flight state and a rest and repair state. But our body can't be in both at all times. So if you are somebody that is chronically stressed, you will know that. You can't be both stressed or at rest at the same time. And our body can't repair itself when it's in a state of stress. It can only do that when it's a state of rest and repair. So let's look at an example of the stress response. It's designed to help us cope in times of urgency. So I'm going to use the example of our little black Patterdale Terrier. At approximately 11 o'clock every day, a little red van drives up our driveway, and our little black terrier goes crazy. He barks and shouts, and if he's outside, my word, the postman doesn't come in, okay, because he's quite terrifying. His hair stands on end, his teeth are showing, his eyes are alight, his heart is beating, his lungs are giving more oxygen. And when he's in that state of arousal, he doesn't need to digest food. So as we dump adrenaline into the body, it closes down our digestive system. So you might think of constipation, for example. Okay, but it increases our heart rate, it opens up our lungs, it makes our eyes dilate, and it prepares us for a state of fight or flight. The great news is that the little red van always turns around and goes back out again. Immediately, Bodger, our little Patterdale Terrier, goes calm, sees off the bad guy, and within 10 minutes, even less perhaps, he could be fast asleep. Or what happens is that the threat has gone away, and so his sympathetic, his fight or flight, dials down, and his parasympathetic dials up. So as his sympathetic dials down and his parasympathetic dials up, his eyes can constrict, his heart can slow down, the bronchioles of his chest can constrict, and his stomach can start working again. The reason why our stomach stops working in a state of stress is we don't in that state of stress, we only actually need things which are immediate. So in that absolute period of fighting the burglar or the bear, or if we think about our history, or Bodger fighting the postman, he doesn't actually need to be ovulating. He's a boy, he doesn't ovulate, but he doesn't need to be digesting food. He doesn't need to be doing all those things. He just really needs to be at the point of action. The great thing about Bodger, though, is he can actually dial down that stress response and go to sleep within about 10 minutes. And so should we be able to. Okay. The difference between us, though, and Bodger is we've got a massive brain, a huge brain sitting at the front of our head here, which enables us to premeditate stress. The postman's coming at 11 o'clock. I'm worried it's going to bring a letter from the bank. So we actually have that worry and anxiety within our head about a potential letter from the bank, which could be serious, arriving at 11 o'clock. So we fire our stress hormones way in advance of that event. We can also remember a stressful episode of our life. And just the mere thought or memory of that stressful episode can cause us to fire all of the circuitry, the wiring, and the hormones of that stressful episode just by recalling it. So it's almost as though we're back in that stressful episode again. And so we can actually say quite fundamentally and categorically that we human beings can actually think ourselves stressed. We can think ourselves stressed. We can, and quite a lot of people that I've come across in life actually can find that they don't really know how to turn those thoughts off. And that's where psychologists and people like that can really be helpful. They don't know how to stop remembering the stressful episode. Okay, now what we have to talk about then about stress is the hormones of stress. So the instance that our body senses stress or senses anything that requires us to raise our game. So for example, if I'm behind at work and I feel that I have to raise my game slightly, my brain will pump a little bit of adrenaline into the system. Okay. If you're an athlete, for example, that's quite a good idea. A bit of adrenaline, because that's actually going to ready your entire body. So if you're in the 100 meters sprint in the Olympics, you're going to, in front of a world audience of 1 billion, you're going to be pretty nervous, and that's going to be a good thing, because that fear is going to fire those hormones of stress, which is going to physiologically change you. Okay, so those hormones of stress are known as catecholamines. Catecholamines. Now, the most famous or the most well-known hormone of stress is adrenaline. And adrenaline can be found throughout our sympathetic nervous system, so at any one of the nerve endings within it, but also it can be dumped in considerable quantities through and from the adrenal glands. The modern word for adrenaline is epinephrine. So if you suffer from asthma, for example, or if you are somebody who might go into anaphylactic shock, you might carry an EpiPen, an epinephrine pen, something that's going to dump a ton of epinephrine or adrenaline into your system that's going to change that shock system, that shock. Okay, so and if you're an asthmatic, you're going to suck some adrenaline in, which is going to change the state of your lungs. Okay. Now, these hormones are designed to prepare us from a state of fight or flight. Now, we humans evolved for approximately 2 million years as cave dwellers. It's only the last 17 to 20,000 or so that we've been organized into communities that we understand now, and only the last 400 or 500 where we've been quite as complicated as we are today. One of the downsides about these hormones is they are addicted. You've heard about the word adrenaline junkies. Well, they are addictive. and we get addicted to the high. But we can also be addicted to the process that our brain goes through. And this tends to lead us to something that will be well known to some of you called depression. Okay. The next hormone in the cascade of the hormones of stress is called cortisol. And cortisol is the opposite of insulin. So insulin takes energy in the form of sugar from our bloodstream and puts it into our fat cells or into our storage cells. Cortisol takes energy from our cells into our bloodstream and prepares us for the fight or flight response. And this is really, really important if the fight or flight response is imminent and present. However, what tends to happen with us human beings, as I've said, is we can fire the fight or flight response just directly from our brain, just by our thoughts, just by our habits. Many people listening, I know, will wake up and look at their smartphone, turn on the news, listen to the radio, and carry out a set of habits that they do every single day. By not breaking these habits, they will automatically fire all of the same stress hormones that they fired yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before. And these hormones will start up their whole day in a cascade of stress. Okay? It will actually crank up their fight or flight response right at the beginning of the day. So you can take from that what you will. If you want to take anything away from this lecture, then tomorrow morning when you wake up, do something absolutely different. Don't even touch your smartphone for at least half an hour. Don't listen to the news until the evening. All of these things are really important. Okay? The nerve circuits that we fire most often are the ones we fire most easily. So if we're a happy person and we're constantly firing completely chilled and happy circuits, we'll fire those ones really easy. If we're a really stressy person and we've got into the habit of being stressed, then we'll fire those circuits really easy. So the nerve circuits that we fire the most often are the ones that we will fire most easily. Okay, so the stress response and health. I've made a brief list of some things that you all, I hope, have a little bit of understanding of, and I can show you how the stress response and the body's either the fight or flight or the rest and repair causes these physiological states. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is asthma. Asthma. Now, asthma afflicts many, many, many people in the world. I never seen an asthmatic till I was sent off to boarding school at 7, and there was a couple of twins in my class and that had Uber helicopter parents, and they used to go and suck on an inhaler in the morning and evening every day at the sanatorium. What they sucked on was adrenaline. Now, let's think about the fight or flight response. As we have our fight or flight response triggered off in our brain, what happens is our bronchioles actually increase in size. So the sympathetic adrenaline increases our bronchioles. So hence when you suck on your inhaler, you open your bronchioles. This allows more air in. When the stress response is gone, what happens is your parasympathetic nervous system, the acetylcholine, actually constricts your bronchioles. It slows down your heart, it kicks, and it provides motor. It actually kickstarts your guts. So think about asthma. What asthma is a hyperconstricted set of bronchioles, which doesn't allow somebody to get air down into their lungs. So they give them adrenaline. This opens them. What is actually happening here is you've got too much parasympathetic and not enough sympathetic. So we take an artificial sympathetic. Okay? That is a direct and very easy to understand health state that directly relates to our fight or flight or our rest and repair response. Okay. The next one that I'm going to talk about, which will have affected almost all of us at some time, is digestion. So not very nice to talk about poo, but constipation or diarrhea. Now, a chiropractor would actually say, if we're thinking about chiropractic philosophy, that up to a point, and obviously, I don't mean dysentery. If you have diarrhea, this is actually a good thing. This is the body expelling something bad. Something has triggered off your response to get rid of something, same as vomiting. However, constipation is the opposite thing. When we fire a stress response, in that moment of the adrenaline and then subsequently the cortisol firing, what actually happens is effectively our nervous system temporarily paralyzes our guts. We don't need to digest food at that moment. We need to use the energy that's already present within our system. So if somebody has a state of chronic constipation, for example, what we would actually say is they have a chronic state sympathetic drive within their stomach. The fight or flight, the adrenal response is overriding everything else and closing the nervous system down. The parasympathetic, or the rest and repair response, is not able to kickstart the guts again. It really doesn't have much to do with what you eat, regardless of what you were told as a child. Okay, that's a wives' tale. All right? Whether you're constipated or not, listen, there might be certain foods that our body finds difficult to push through. We need more fiber, vegetables, and less soft, squishy food. That gives our muscular purchase. But that in itself is not the cause of constipation. The cause of the constipation is the inability of your body to regulate your fight or flight response and your rest and repair response. This is also the cause of so-called IBS. IBS is just one of those bags that people put things they don't understand in. I believe I understand IBS as a chiropractor. I don't treat IBS, I would like to say that, but I believe I understand it. And IBS is just the inability of your body to regulate your fight or flight response and your rest and repair response, to get the balance right so that your stomach's, you beg your pardon, that your entire viscera, your digestive system is working optimally. The next one I'm going to talk about is adrenal fatigue. Now, I know quite a few people with what I would describe as adrenal fatigue. Now, type 2 diabetes, for example, you've been eating the wrong foods, you've been eating lots of sweet and fatty foods for so long that you wear out the cells within your pancreas that produce insulin. So you end up with a form of diabetes because the factory's knackered. The factory's been working so hard, it just says, listen, I'm tired. It's the same with our body. If our body has been pushing adrenaline for so many years, months, years, without a break, what happens is we end up with adrenal fatigue. Your adrenal glands and all of the organs that fire adrenaline are a little bit knackered. And this means they can fire inappropriately. You may end up with somebody with terrible insomnia and various other physiological states related to. They feel tired all the time. They've just got no get up and go. Because actually, to get going, you need a little bit of adrenaline. Actually get going. So somebody who has that sort of chronic fatigue, ME, that's somebody who's got very low adrenaline. They're a little bit burnt out. Okay, in most people who talk about ME, you'd actually find that they've had quite a significant stress stimulation and response for a long period of time. Now, perhaps the most important thing that happens with continual stress is that it inhibits our brain function. If we're stressed for too long, we actually lose our memory and we lose the ability, the ability for our front of our brain here, the bit that makes us human, to fire and work properly is inhibited. So we start to make some poor decisions. Let's give you an example. When I'm very stressed or very tired and worn out, and I'm at the end of my rep, I come home from a very long day, and I will look around the house, and I won't look around, for all of that lovely, soft, juicy lettuce. I will look around for a Mars bar or a bar full of sugar, something that's going to give me immediate energy. I'm craving sugar. All of those hormones are giving me to crave sugar. Not only are they getting me to crave sugar, but my brain is dialed down and my inability to say no to that sugar becomes less. It's really important. I might also have a glass of wine or a beer to rest because my brain is dialed down. I can't say no. And so my inability to make the good decision at the time of stress, not at the time of exact stress, but the time of prolonged stress, is because your prefrontal cortex begins to stop working. So while stress is good for a period of time, I think I perform a little bit better under a little bit of stress personally. If that stress carries on for years and years and years, or months and months and months, eventually we start to make some pretty crap decisions. That's why people under a lot of stress often put on a bit of weight, and they begin to look crap. Their skin looks crap because they're eating a bad diet, and their hair might lose its luster because of bad diet and bad choices. Okay. Quite after significantly prolonged stress, we might also find ourselves less productive. They often find that women who've lived in stressful situations such as the Holocaust or in Bosnia-Herzegovina in more recent times, they might not menstruate for many, many months. And even if they do, it's intermittent. And that's because whilst that cycle is to an extent mediated by the hormones of the reproductive cycle, it is also mediated by the stress system. So too much stress stress hormones in too much quantity also stimulate the production of our thyroid gland and hair. Too much stress and we burn out our thyroid gland. And so that's why when I started here, I said stress is the new smoking. And we are making ourselves stressed. There is a very good study that just the possession of this phone within my sphere of influence is enough to make me stressed. What's the email going to say? Have my Facebook post been liked? Is my Instagram post being liked? So, and my children have one of these, and I can't really deny them it, but it's a tricky fight. But just the presence of this is stressful for almost everybody. One of the highest causes of disease within the United Kingdom and most of the Western world is high blood pressure and heart disease. And the primary organ that stress affects the most is the brain and the heart. And so heart disease and high blood pressure are quite often a result of consistent, unbridled stress over many, many years. Now, you can either treat the symptom, take a high blood pressure medication, or you can look at the cause and look at why these things are happening. Now, I must state that I'm a chiropractor, and I'm giving you a lesson on stress. By the laws of Great Britain, I cannot state that chiropractic can in any way help stress. Okay, I'll point some connectors about how having a healthy body can help you with stress, but chiropractic specifically is not a cure or a treatment for stress. Actually, there isn't anything really that is a treatment for stress except taking the stimulus away and allowing your body to heal. Now, there are 3 forms of stress. They are physical stress, emotional stress, and chemical stress. So let's talk about an example of physical stress. How's my posture doing? And the answer is it's bad. And this is a physical stressor. Hard work, lack of movement. There's emotional stress, divorce, mortgages, finances, loss of job. Are the kids okay? This is the one that we tend to think about. And the third one is chemical stress. Every Friday night, my favorite chemical stressor is red wine. I've actually had to pretty much hardly drink it because I find it has too much of an effect on my body. But alcohol, makeup, anything you put on your skin. When I gave up smoking, I used those patches. It was absorbed through the skin. Many people take their HRT through their skin. So anything we put on our skin can be a stressor. Too much sun, too little sun. All of these can be stressors, chemical stresses. So what I started with is I said stress. What is the definition of stress? And stress is anything that causes our body to adapt. If we have too much physical stress, bad posture, I used to be in the army, used to carry a heavy pack for miles and miles and miles. This causes our body to have to adapt. After 50 kilometers of carrying a heavy pack over the Brecon Beacons, your body's in quite a severe state of stress. If you are a desk worker and you sit at a computer in the modern world like this, after a period of time, your body will be in a state of stress, lack of movement. If you are in any way unhappy, like I said, when I'm running behind at work, I can get emotionally stressed. I can get emotionally stressed with people who annoy me. I can get emotionally stressed with the government, the news. In fact, in Britain, it's very, very popular to be emotionally stressed with the government at all times. It seems to be a sort of national hobby. Whatever government's in, scream at them, because we get all of our feedback from them through the news. The final stressor is chemical stressor, and this affects all of us. Our entire food system has changed. Think about a preservative. I was looking at something today. I think it was some jam, something like that, and it had a best before date, which was about 2 or 3 years down the line. That preservative that stops the wee beasties from eating it is also going to stop our digestion. It's going to give our digestive system a challenge. So we have all of these stresses, and our health at any given point is directly related to how well we are coping and adapting to those three stresses. And when we get those stresses, it has a physiological effect on our body. Okay. Our spine, I'm a chiropractor. Too much stress, all of those stresses will have an effect on our spine. I guarantee that. They say you wear stress on your shoulders, and you do. People who are stressed end up like this. Okay. So what can we do about stress? Well, the first thing that most of us have to do is actually identify that we are stressed. Most people who are depressed don't know. It's only everybody who is around them that does. And actually, because we're addicted to the hormones of stress, people who have depression, for example, actually they don't say that or they don't think it outwardly, they like to fire those hormones off right away. In fact, without them, it's almost like they're missing a friend. So we have to actually realize that we have a problem. That is the first thing. The second thing is therefore take it away. So if you are suffering from too much physical stress, sitting badly, if maybe you were a chainsaw operator or something like that, you need to realize that what you're doing is having an effect. I have realized that after 15 years in the army and other things, that my alcohol consumption, whilst never at any point too much, well, maybe everything's relative, it has an effect on me now. Okay. Also, I run a business, so coronavirus was very stressful, certainly to start off with, before I relaxed. Okay. So realizing that we're stressed is the most important thing. So stress fires our fight or flight. Well, if we take the stimulus away, that is one thing. But actually, for some of us that have been stressed for a long, long period of time, what we have to do is to kickstart our parasympathetic. That's actually to fire the rest and repair circuitry. Now, the obvious answer for that is to start to do things which take you out of the fight or flight zone. This is why yoga, Pilates, I use meditation and breathing to help me, because all of those things are absolutely proven to fire your fight, your rest and repair response. Remember, you can't be in a state of fight or flight and rest and repair at the same time. You just can't. Okay. Now, if you are a parent, if you are an adult that spends a hell of a lot of time on one of these things, then stop it. Actually, my phone now tells me what my screen time is. And I'm absolutely horrified at how much time I can waste on it. When I'm extremely stressed, it's just the easiest thing in the world just to go like this and literally just to flick and slide through it. Okay, these things are great. If you are struggling to sleep, get rid of any digital stimulation sometime before sleep, so that your brain can move from a state of fight or flight where you're awake and absorbing to a state of rest and repair where you can actually dial down your adrenaline and change. Okay, now, chiropractic and stress. As I've stated, absolutely, fundamentally, and legally, I cannot say that chiropractic treats stress. In fact, if you ask me, I would say chiropractic treats nothing, but that's for another conversation. I would say all we do is improve the function of your spine and nervous system, and your brain gets on and does anything. But fundamentally, I just want to get it out there overtly that chiropractic does not treat stress. However, let's think what chiropractic does happen. The firing of stress hormones and neurology is habitual. It is a neurological cycle that goes round from the body to the brain, and the brain to the body, and the body to the brain, and the brain to the body, and the body to the brain. And like I've said, those nerve patterns that we fire most often are the nerve patterns that we fire most easily. And if you were at my last talk on pain, what I said there is chiropractic is not about treating pain, but about reprogramming how the brain sees the body. So changing those firing patterns. Now, there are 4 things that we actually need for our brain to be healthy. Can you think what they are? The most obvious is oxygen, okay? About 40% of all of our oxygen goes to our brain. So even if we're not moving, we are burning calories if we're thinking. The second thing we need is to get sugar, and our brain likes the purest form of energy it can. It really likes sugar. It likes glycogen, and it likes glucose, purest form, the easiest it can to get at. Right? In our muscles, we can use other forms of energy, but our brain likes that. The third thing is, every night between approximately 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., I go to sleep or I rest. Our brain needs that, as does our body, to recalibrate, to repair, and to reset us. So those are 3 of the. Now, can anybody think what the 4th thing our brain needs to be healthy? The answer is stimulation, okay? Stimulation from our 5 senses: smell, sight, taste, touch, and hearing, but also stimulation from our body. Now, you can live without all of your 5 senses. You can live without your sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, but you actually can't live without the stimulation from your body. We call that proprioception. You can't live without it. If my brain does not know my lungs are full, it doesn't know to empty them. About 80% of the stimulation that comes from our body comes from our spine. We've got so many moving segments within our spine that every time we move our spine, we send a huge amount of information up to our brain. And when we move our spine, doing whichever work, there is no movement pattern that we can do without moving our spine, as far as I know, it lights up our brain all over the place. Sitting down and doing a Sudoku or a crossword only lights up a tiny part of our brain. So if we have bad movement of the spine, it is like giving our brain bad food, because one of the 4 things our brain needs to be healthy is movement, and about 80% of the movement stimulation our brain gets comes from our spine. And actually, if you really want to know, about 80% of that comes from our neck. So people who have a lot of pain and stiff neck, actually their thinking can be quite impaired because they're not getting that really important stimulation from the proprioceptors of the spine. So chiropractors can't treat stress. Chiropractors don't treat anything. All we actually do is look at the movement and the neurological patterns related between the spine and the brain. If we have poorly functioning spine and poorly functioning neurological patterns associated with that, our brain will be lacking one of the really key things it needs to be healthy. If you're not moving properly, you'll find your prefrontal brain, your thinking brain, will actually be slightly diminished, and you will make bad decisions. So if you are fit, healthy, your spine is healthy, that will actually help you to make good decisions. It will also help your subconscious brain to override neurological patterns. So chiropractic itself doesn't actually treat stress, but having a healthy spine, as I've said, is very, very, very important. Now, for those of you who, with our last lecture on pain, we talked about Hebb's law. Hebb's law says that nerves that fire together, wire together, nerves that wire together, fire together. So those nerves that are entrenched. So if you think about my bicep here, my bicep is predominantly fired by my C5 nerve that comes out of my neck here. That same nerve space also deals with my stomach, or the area that food goes into my stomach. It also deals with the musculature around my heart space. And so if we have a misfiring of part of our brain, Hebb's law states that the other nerves associated with that can also be affected. So if Hebb's law is correct, then if we have a problem with something that causes a problem in our spine, or a problem in our spine that causes a problem somewhere else, by changing that, we can also change the neurological response. So, in summary, stress is a killer. It is the most common killer in the modern world. One of the most common causes of death of young men is suicide. One of the most common causes of death of people over 50 is a heart attack, high blood pressure, strokes. Many of these things are caused by stress, not only emotional stress, but also chemical stress. If we've eaten a crap diet all of our lives, a diet that is stressful to our body, then we are actually stress loading our body, and our body is going to struggle with that. Our stress is based on our autonomic nervous system. This is the fight or flight, and this is very useful for us at a moment or at a period of stress, when we are required to operate or to fire at a slightly higher level, such as the bear coming into the cave, or the other tribe coming to steal our hunting territory and having a little war. But in modern life, we can create these stress things by watching the news. I seriously suggest that everybody should consider only watching the news once a day, only once a day, and do it in the early evening, like 6 p.m., so that by the time you've got to bed, the stress hormones have gone. I choose not to watch the news at all. I catch a very quick summary once a day online, because I just felt that I didn't need that stress in my life. I don't need that daily soap opera. Okay? We have those hormones of stress affect us physiologically. They increase our heart rate, they fire other hormones within us, and they decrease our digestive system. We need to increase our parasympathetic, our fight or flight, and to decrease the hormones of stress. So if you have a consistent perennial visceral problem, then you probably have a consistent perennial problem keeping the balance between your fight and your flight and your rest and repair going. Okay, a chemical stressor for me is wheat. I found about 3 years ago I'm extremely allergic to wheat. If I eat wheat, it is very stressful to my system, and my body responds likewise. So stress is just not the boss. Stress is just not marital harmony. Stress is not the kids. Stress is not money. Stress is anything that causes us to adapt. And in principle, they fall into physical, chemical, and emotional. I'm a chiropractor. I don't treat stress. I only treat the spine. But having a healthy spine is absolutely tantamount to having a healthy brain. That is fact. And if we have a healthy brain, it tends to help us moderate our stress response. Okay, so I'm not going to say that chiropractic helps stress. I'm only going to say chiropractic helps the spine, but having a healthy spine helps the brain. And the healthier your brain, the healthier your life. You need to increase your parasympathetic. I choose to do this through exercise. By the way, if you are stressy and you fire adrenaline, and adrenaline fires cortisol, and cortisol is designed to prepare our body for a state of fight or flight, one of the ways that you can actually use up that hormone is exercise. So I choose to do some pretty physical exercise every day so that all the stress in my body, the fight or flight, is used up. I'm using up all that spare energy, and it also produces really nice hormones into my body, which make me feel better, endorphins. Okay. I also choose to meditate, and I also choose to dump my phone at about 9 p.m. every night. I don't just put it away, because that constant Facebook, Instagram news cycle just triggers a whole lot of hormones and neurology in our brain. That's just not very good for us. Okay. So we're coming to the end there. If you have any questions, please write them in the comments section, and I will try and answer them for you. Could you please explain how those 3 major stresses, physical, could impact your spinal health? Okay. So the question is, could you please explain how the 3 major stresses, physical, emotional, chemical, could impact your spinal health? The answer is directly or indirectly. So we have some hypotheses and we have some things which are proven. Physical stress, as in bad posture, carrying heavy loads and things, we know that this affects our joint biomechanics. And as our joint biomechanics change, it alters the neurology, how our brain receives information from those joints, and therefore how the joints are controlled. So that's physical. Chemical. Well, all chemicals within our body have to be processed through an organ. The most common organ for processing chemicals is the liver. I can often tell with all of my practice members who is on blood pressure medications. Anybody on any form of constant medications will be very tender over the third rib. I don't know who worked that out, but that is directly indicative of the liver working hard, or the liver being in a state of stress. Now, in chiropractic understanding, we talk about somatovisceral. That's somato is the body and visceral is the organ. We talk about there being a cycle, as I've explained at the beginning, between the spine and that organ and the spine. Well, Hebb's law states that if the firing of any cycle goes wrong, then the firing of everything associated with that nerve has the potential to go wrong, which can lead to some changes in how the nerves that control our spine happen. Emotional stress, the third stress, causes us to fire all of the stress response, the fight or flight response. And this has a massive impact on almost all of our organs consistently. It also has a massive impact on the muscles of our body. Quite often, the muscles controlled close to our neck contract. So we end up with our shoulders that are pulled up and round. And this has an effect on how our head and our brain operates. Okay. A lot of the understanding of this at the moment within chiropractic is hypothetical, but that is in effect how it works. I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? Well, it's been lovely, guys, and I hope everybody's got something out of this. We'll be emailing you all a copy of this, so if you want to watch it again, you'll get a copy of this, and feel free to share it around. As we are all in lockdown and as we've been through the COVID crisis, we swear at everybody else, but actually the only way that any of us are going to survive anything is by having a good immune system. And whilst there are certain things that affect your immune system that you have no control over, almost all of us actually have much more control over our immune system than we would like to admit. And quite often, the solution to many of our problems lies inside of us, not outside. And that we have to change our life, change our habits, and change our healthcare from inside of us, not necessarily from outside of us. And sometimes we need some help, and that's where people like chiropractors, psychologists, and other people come in. If we just take pills, then in effect we're just gently masking all the symptoms. Okay, but listen, if you've got depression, take an antidepressant. I'm not saying don't do that, but that's where it comes from. Lovely to have you all, and we'll. If anybody has any questions, please just email us at Tweet Chiropractic Clinic or go through the Facebook page. Is actually the easiest one. Okay. Take care, guys. Lovely to have you all. Bye-bye.